A centuries-old vampire, already bound by engagement, saves a mortal girl on a moonlit night, only to discover her blood carries the power to end his curse. As forbidden love grows between them, they must choose between his immortal duty and the dangerous truth pulsing in her veins. Their fate will decide not only their hearts, but the future of vampires and humans alike. Most people think vampire stories are about darkness, but this one is really about a king who tried his whole life to be kinder than the monster everyone believed he was. If you listen closely, you'll hear that it isn't just his fangs that are sharp, it's the choices he has to make with a heart that refuses to turn to stone. On the highest balcony of Noxon Castle, under a round white moon, the vampire king stood alone. His name was Arion, and after 500 years of ruling the night, he still felt awkward every time someone knelt to him. The wind pulled at his dark cloak and carried the faint sounds of the sleeping human city below, distant carts, a barking dog, a baby crying somewhere. Those small, fragile sounds meant more to him than any crown. The council wanted fear. His fiancée wanted power. Arion wanted something different, a kingdom where no one screamed when they heard his name. Behind him, the great hall glowed with warm torchlight and quiet music. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of his engagement to Lady Saraphene, the most powerful of the old vampire families. The marriage would keep the clans united and the humans under safe protection, as the council called it. Saraphene moved among the guests like a flawless ruby, smiling without ever softening. She was beautiful, frightening, and perfectly loyal to the ancient ways. Arion respected her. He simply did not love her, and he doubted she loved anything she could not control. He rested his hands on the cold stone railing and let his eyes shift, their color deepening as he looked far beyond the city lights into the dark stretch of forest and road. It was a habit he never explained to anyone. While others drank and laughed inside the castle, Arion spent most festival nights like this, watching, listening, making sure the peace they bragged about in speeches was real for the people walking home in the dark. His nights called it paranoia. In truth, it was guilt. Too many years ago, before he chose a different path, he had been the fear on the road. A soft step sounded behind him. He didn't need to turn to know it was Saraphene. Her presence was like winter, beautiful, sharp, and slightly too cold to touch for long. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice smooth as polished glass, "our guests grow restless without you. They wish to toast the future king and queen together, not stare at your empty throne." He answered without taking his eyes off the road far below. "The future king and queen will rule over humans, not just crystal goblets. Someone should care whether the roads are safe on a night like this." Seraphine came to stand beside him, her gown whispering against the marble. For a moment they looked like a perfect royal pair, two elegant figures under the moon, one with hair as black as a raven's wing, the other with eyes that glowed faintly red. "The roads are safe," she said. "Our patrols are out. Any human foolish enough to wander tonight has chosen their own fate." She tilted her head, studying him. "You are too soft, Arion. Mercy does not feed a kingdom." "Fear doesn't heal it either," he replied quietly. She smiled at that, a small, amused curve of her lips, and for a heartbeat he saw a hint of respect in her gaze. Then her expression cooled again. "Come inside. Tomorrow the council will announce the date of our wedding. It will comfort them to see you obey at least one tradition." Her hand brushed his arm, polite and distant, and she returned to the hall without waiting for his answer. Arion almost followed, almost. Then at the edge of his sharpened hearing, something cut through the comfortable night sounds like a knife through silk, a terrified human scream, then the crack of splintering wood. His whole body went still. The sound had come from the northern road where travelers crossed the ravine, too far for human ears, too far for any ordinary guard to reach in time. Without another thought, he stepped up onto the railing and dropped from the balcony. The wind roared past him as he fell, then caught under his cloak when he twisted, landing silently on the lower wall before vanishing into the shadows below. In seconds he was nothing but a blur across the rooftops, then a whisper of wind weaving through the forest. Leaves shivered as he passed. His senses opened fully now, every heartbeat, every breath, every drop of blood moving through the veins of the night. Somewhere ahead, fear was burning like a small, bright flame. He reached the ravine just as a carriage wheel broke free and spun into the dark, crashing against stone. The carriage itself hung at a desperate angle, its back wheels still on the road, its front half tilted over empty air. The horses screamed and kicked, trying to pull away from the broken harness. Three cloaked figures surrounded the carriage, eyes gleaming faintly. Arion recognized their kind instantly. Young vampires, hungry and reckless, the sort who loved legends of the old brutal days and ignored every law he had written. He stepped out of the shadows with no dramatic sound, no roar, no blast of magic, just a quiet presence that changed the air. The nearest attacker turned, fangs bared, then froze when he recognized the tall figure in the dark embroidered coat, the plain silver crown glinting at his collar. "King Arion," the vampire stammered, backing away. "We didn't know." You knew my laws, Arion said, his voice calm but carrying like thunder over the ravine. No forced feeding, no terror on the king's roads, no hunting the innocent. His gaze moved to the carriage. Through the shattered door he saw a young woman pinned against the cushions, her hands clutching the frame to keep from sliding out into the fall. Her gown was travel-stained, not noble, and her eyes, wide, hazel, fiercely alive, met his for a heartbeat. She did not scream. She only stared at him, breath quick, as if trying to decide whether the devil had come to finish what the others started. The youngest attacker grabbed the trembling horse's reins. We just needed a taste, Your Majesty, just enough to get us through the high hunger she would have lived. His tone was defensive, almost childish. Arion's jaw tightened. A long time ago he had sounded exactly like that. He remembered what it felt like to treat human fear as background music, to believe that needing something excused everything. You will live, he said, she will too. In one smooth motion, faster than a human blink, he moved. He didn't strike them with claws or teeth. He used the old training instead, pressure on the wrist to disarm, a sharp twist to send one sprawling, a single blow to the chest to knock the wind from another. The third tried to lunge, but Arion caught his collar and simply held him there, feet kicking uselessly above the ground. When it was done, all three lay groaning or gasping on the road, more frightened than hurt. Arion's breath remained steady, the only sign of his anger was the deepening red of his eyes. You will report to the Night Council at dawn, he told them. You will work in the human clinics for a year, you will learn what fear feels like from the other side of the bed. None of them argued, they scrambled away, dragging each other into the trees. Only then did he turn back to the carriage. The horses were calming, their sides heaving with relief as he laid a reassuring hand on their necks. With his other hand he gripped the shattered frame and with a strength he rarely showed, pulled the entire broken front of the carriage back onto solid ground. Wood groaned, metal screamed. Slowly the wheels settled on the road again. Dust floated in the moonlight like silver mist. Inside, the young woman sagged in relief, her knuckles white where she still clung to the seat. A thin line of blood trickled down her forehead where a splintered beam had caught her. The smell of it hit him at once, warm, bright, threaded with something unfamiliar, like sunlight caught in a bottle. It wasn't just that it smelled good. All human blood tempted a vampire. This was different. It was like hearing a forgotten song he had loved when he was still human, a melody he never thought he'd hear again. He swallowed hard, forcing his fangs to retreat. For centuries he had lived by the rule that no human would ever bleed for his hunger. He drank carefully measured donations, animal blood, rare, willing offerings from those who came to the palace clinics. One sip from a frightened stranger on the road could burn everything he had built. Are you hurt anywhere else? He asked, keeping his voice gentle as he reached in to help her. She hesitated only a second, then placed her trembling hand in his. Her skin was warmer than he expected, and there was a faint, steady strength in her grip. My arm, she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. And my pride, I thought traveling alone would prove I wasn't afraid of the dark. There was a tiny quiver of humor in her voice even now. He almost smiled, courage right at the edge of panic. He respected that. Fear is not weakness, he said. Surviving in spite of it is courage. He eased her out of the carriage. When she tried to stand, her injured leg buckled and she fell forward. Without thinking, Arion caught her, one arm around her back, the other under her knees, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. For a brief moment her face was inches from his. He saw the freckles across her nose, the stubborn set of her jaw, the tears she was fighting not to shed. She saw the faint red glow in his eyes, the controlled tension in his shoulders, the way his expression held more worry than hunger. You're the king, she whispered, realization dawning. The vampire king. Yes, he admitted, expecting the usual fear. Instead, she whispered, you came yourself. Those three simple words sank deeper than any praise he had heard in centuries. He looked away, suddenly unsure what to do with the warmth that rose in his chest. I was nearby, he said, and the roads are my responsibility. He started toward the tree line, planning to carry her to the hidden path that led up to the castle's side entrance. It would be safer to treat her injuries there than leave her on the open road. As he moved, a loose shard of the carriage roof cracked above them. He heard it start to fall, but there was no time to shift her fully out of the way. He turned his body, taking the hit across his back. The wood broke against him, harmless to someone who had survived battles and centuries. But a thin, sharp splinter sliced across the woman's arm, just below his hand. She gasped softly, more surprised than hurt. A single drop of her blood slid down her skin and fell. It landed against his lower lip. The world snapped into a different color. Arion froze mid-step. The drop was tiny, almost nothing. He hadn't even opened his mouth. But as the warm liquid touched his skin, a shock rushed through him, not like hunger, not like the pleasant burn of feeding. This was something else, something that roared down every nerve and flooded his old, silent chest. For the first time in 500 years, the vampire king felt his heart give one slow, painful, impossible beat. He staggered, tightening his hold on her so he wouldn't drop her. Her eyes widened in alarm. "What's wrong? Did they hurt you?" she asked, searching his face. He stared at her, stunned, hearing that single heartbeat echo inside him like a drum in an empty hall. There was no way this could be real. No spell, no ritual, no prayer had ever moved his dead heart, not even by a fraction. Yet one drop of this stranger's blood had done what centuries of desperate hope could not. He opened his mouth to answer, but the sound of approaching hooves cut through the night, armored riders drawing near fast. Human guards, by the clank of their gear, shouting about monsters on the road. If they arrived now and found their king holding a bleeding woman with eyes glowing red, everything he had just protected could shatter. Caught between the thunder of hooves and the thunder of his own impossible heartbeat, Arion realized he had only seconds to decide. Reveal himself and risk panic, or vanish with her into the shadows and keep both her secret and his. With the truth in her blood still burning on his lips, the vampire king tightened his grip, turned toward the darkness of the forest path and made his choice. The forest closed around them as the king ran, but to the woman in his arms it must have felt less like running and more like flying. Branches blurred into dark streaks. The cold air tore at her hair and pressed tears from the corners of her eyes. She clung to his cloak with one hand and to her own courage with the other, amazed that the only thing steady in the rushing world was the way he held her, careful as if she were something precious and breakable. Behind them, the shouts of the human guards faded into the distance. Ahead, the castle rose like a sleeping mountain, its towers cutting the moon into sharp pieces. Arion's senses raced faster than his feet. The single impossible heartbeat he had felt still echoed inside his chest, followed by another, slower, heavier, like an old door trying to remember how to open. Every time the woman's warm breath touched his neck, his ribs shivered as if something inside them was waking up. "You're hurting," she said suddenly, her voice small against the wind. "I can feel you tense. Is it your back?" From the carriage. He almost laughed at the idea that falling wood could harm him. "I am not so easily broken," he answered, but the words did not sound as smooth as he meant them to. He cleared his throat. "What is your name?" "Liora," she said, the word soft and bright in the night. "My father chose it because it means light. He thought it was funny to name his clumsiest child after something graceful." Arion tasted the name in his mind. Liora, light, the irony was not lost on him. "You held on well enough," he said. "Most would have fainted." "Most don't grow up with a sister who likes to drive carts over ditches," she shot back, then flushed. "Sorry, I talk too much when I'm scared." "Talking is better than screaming," he replied. "Screaming attracts the wrong kind of attention." Her eyes searched his face. "Is that what I did, attract the wrong kind of attention? Were they your people?" "Yes," he said, not hiding from the truth. "My people, my responsibility, and my mistake." A colder pain threaded through the strange warmth in his chest. "I promised the humans of this realm that such nights were over. I have not kept that promise well enough." She studied him for a heartbeat, confusion and curiosity fighting in her gaze. "You came," she said at last. "Sometimes keeping a promise looks like fixing what went wrong, not pretending it never does." The simple kindness of that thought pierced deeper than any insult could. He slowed as they reached a wall of ivy at the base of the outer cliff. Hidden behind it was a narrow stone door, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Arion set Liora gently on her feet, keeping a steadying hand under her elbow as her injured leg tested the ground. She winced but stayed upright, stubborn. He almost told her she didn't need to be brave for him, but he also understood the pride that refused to show weakness. He pressed his palm to a worn symbol carved into the stone. Old magic hummed under his skin, and the door slid open with a sigh. Warm candlelight spilled out, along with the faint scent of herbs and parchment. A tall vampire guard inside straightened at the sight of him, fist moving to his chest in salute. Then his eyes widened at the human girl standing beside the king. Arion spoke before the guard could ask questions. "No one saw us enter. No one is to speak of this without my order. Understood?" "Yes, your majesty," the guard replied, but his gaze lingered on Liora with a mix of curiosity and something like respect. Humans rarely came through this door alive. The passageway beyond was narrow but clean, lined with tapestries instead of torches to soften the sound of footsteps. As they walked, Liora brushed her fingers along one of the faded designs, a painting of the night sky stitched in silver thread. "I didn't know vampires used side doors," she whispered, half teasing, half in awe. "Even kings need quiet ways in," Arion said, "especially when they bring unexpected guests." He glanced at her bandaged arm, already sticky with half-dried blood. The sight stirred that strange pull inside him again, but this time it wasn't hunger, it was worry. They reached a small chamber bright with lamplight and shelves of glass bottles. A gentle-faced vampire with silver hair tied back at his nape looked up from a desk covered in notes. He wore no armor, only a plain dark coat with rolled sleeves, ink stains on his fingers. Your Majesty, he asked, rising at once, you seldom visit the human ward yourself. This is Master Salem, Arion said to Liora. He has treated more humans than most human doctors I know. You are safe with him. Selim's eyes softened when he saw her. Come sit, he said, pulling out a sturdy chair. His voice carried the calm of someone who had seen pain and decided not to fear it. We will clean that cut and check for any broken bones. I promise no biting involved. Liora blinked, then let out a surprised little laugh that seemed to lift some of the tension from her shoulders. She sank into the chair and Selim washed the wound with gentle, practiced hands. Arion watched from the doorway, arms folded, pretending he was only there to supervise. The truth was, every time he considered leaving, the faint ache in his chest reminded him that something in him was now physically tied to the girl on that chair. Forgive me, Selim murmured as he worked. The sting will pass quickly. He wrapped her arm in clean linen with careful precision. You were very fortunate tonight. Was I? Liora asked, because I keep wondering if I brought this on myself. She stared at the floor. I chose to travel alone. I insisted on taking the night road. I thought if I pretended not to be afraid, maybe I would stop being afraid. That is not how fear works, Selim said softly. It ends when we learn to listen to it without obeying it blindly. You were brave, not foolish. Arion's gaze flicked to his old healer with quiet gratitude. Kindness was as important as bandages in this room, and Selim never forgot that. The healer reached for a small glass vial and a fine needle. There is one more thing, he explained. We take a drop of blood from every human we treat. It lets us check for infection, for weakness, for signs of poisons. It is for your safety, not ours. May I? Liora hesitated only a second, then nodded. If I made it through a falling carriage, I can survive a pinprick. The needle flashed, quick and almost painless. A dark red drop fell into the vial. Selim stoppered it and held it up to the light, ready to judge its color and clarity the way he had done 1,000 times before. He froze. The liquid inside did not simply gleam. It shimmered as if tiny flecks of gold dust were scattered through it, catching the lamplight and bending it back. For a moment it looked less like blood and more like a fragment of sunrise trapped in glass. At the same instant, Arion felt a second hard thud in his chest, followed by a third, weak but real. His hand closed so tightly around the doorframe that the old wood creaked. Selim, he asked, his voice lower than before. The healer's eyes had widened to the size of coins. Your Majesty, this cannot be. He set the vial down with both hands as if afraid of breaking the world it contained. The faint golden glow did not fade. Liora looked between them, alarm flickering in her expression. Is something wrong with me? She asked, her voice small again. People in my village always said I was strange, but I didn't think my blood would start glowing on your table. Arion forced his features to smooth, even while that unfamiliar pounding echoed in his ears. You are not wrong, he said slowly. You are unusual, we will find out why. He stepped fully into the room now, drawn closer by a force he did not yet dare to name. Liora, why were you truly traveling alone tonight? Where were you going? She took a breath and seemed to gather herself, as if deciding whether to trust him with something heavy. I was coming here, she said, to your castle, to you. The words landed like another blow to his chest. To me, he repeated. Liora nodded, her fingers twisted in the edge of her cloak. There have been things over the years, small at first. A sick bird I wrapped in cloth that flew again the next morning, a boy with a fever who touched my hand and cooled within minutes. My father said I was lucky. The villagers said it was a blessing or a curse depending on the day. She glanced at the glowing vial. Lately it's been stronger. I cut myself once while helping in the fields and my blood dripped onto a dying sapling. The next day there were buds on its branches. Selim sucked in a silent breath. Arion said nothing, afraid his voice would crack. And then, Liora continued, eyes distant with memory, a hunter brought home a creature from the deep woods. Not quite a wolf, not quite a bat, something in between. It was hurt, angry, everyone wanted to kill it. I don't know what I was thinking, but I touched its fur. Some of my blood smeared on its wound, its eyes changed, it stopped growling. It just went quiet and then slipped away into the trees as if it remembered it was not meant to be a monster. She shook her head. After that, people stopped calling it a blessing. She lifted her gaze to Arion, searching. They said my blood wasn't natural, that maybe some dark thing had touched me as a baby, but I heard a different story once. A rumor that long ago the vampire king gave his own blood to save a human child, that he regretted it, that he sent a letter with his royal seal and never spoke of it again. Her hand moved to a small leather pouch at her belt. I was told this was left with me when I was very young. I thought it was just a story, until the things with my blood started happening. Slowly she drew out a folded piece of yellowed parchment. The wax seal on the back was cracked, but its shape was still clear, a stylized crescent and crown, Arion's crest. His stomach dropped. I was coming to ask you, Liora said quietly, if this letter is real. If my life, if my blood is my own, or if it belongs to some mistake a king made a long time ago. Her voice trembled on the last words, not from anger but from a deep, tired fear. The room fell utterly still. Even the candles seemed to hold their breath. Arion reached for the letter with hands that had never shaken in battle but shook now. He didn't need to open it to recognize it. The slant of the writing on the outside, the faint mark of a ring pressed into the wax, these were his. He had written that letter more than 20 years ago after a night of desperate choice, when a dying infant in a border village had looked up at him with eyes too new to understand fear. He had given a single drop of his blood to save her, then spent years wondering if he had cursed a child instead of blessing her. Selim's gaze flickered from the glowing vial to the king's face. "Your Majesty," he whispered, almost reverent, "do you remember the prophecy of the heart-bearer, the one born from shared blood, whose veins could stir the dead heart and bridge the night to dawn?" Arion barely heard him. His own reborn pulse thundered in his ears now, steady, undeniable. He felt every beat like a question hammering against his ribs. "What have you done? What will you do?" Before he could answer Liora, before he could confess that the mistake she spoke of was his, the door to the ward swung open with a sharp crack against the wall. Lady Saraphene stepped inside, her deep red gown untouched by dust, her dark eyes sweeping the room in one swift, measuring glance. They paused on Liora, on the bandage, on the vial of softly glowing blood, then on the king, standing too close to a human girl with a letter that bore his own broken seal. Her voice was calm, but there was steel under the silk. "Tell me, Arion," she said, using his name instead of his title. "Why is there a human in our hidden ward whose blood shines like dawn, and why does the sound of your heart just echoed through the stone of this castle?" Seraphine's words hung in the air like a blade, and for the first time in centuries, Arion felt truly exposed. His heartbeat, still slow and uncertain, seemed louder than the crackling lamps. It was as if the castle itself had leaned in to listen. He straightened, not in the proud way a king does for display, but in the quiet way a man does when he refuses to run from his own truth. "You were not invited to this ward, Saraphene," he said, keeping his tone even. "Yet here you are." "I followed the echo," she answered. "I thought it was a trick. I have not heard a heartbeat in you since the night we met. Now I find you in a hidden room with a glowing vial and a human girl who holds your seal." Her gaze drifted to Liora, sharp and careful. "You will forgive me if I am curious." Liora shifted in the chair, her fingers tightening around the folded letter. Despite the fear tightening her shoulders, she did not shrink back. She studied Saraphene with open eyes, the jeweled pins in her black hair, the flawless posture, the guarded expression that never quite reached anger but never fully relaxed. Liora had expected the Vampire King's fiancé to look cruel. Instead, she looked tired of pretending not to care. Selim stepped slightly in front of the table, as if to shield the vial with his presence. "Lady Saraphene," he said politely, "this is a medical ward. The human is injured. The unusual nature of her blood is a matter for quiet study, not immediate panic." "Unusual," Saraphene repeated, the corner of her mouth tightening. "Is that what we call prophecy now?" Her eyes flickered to the vial again. "My tutors told me stories when I was young, about blood touched by both night and dawn, about a child who could stir the heart of the king and unmake the old laws of hunger." She looked at Arion. "I always thought they were using fairy tales to frighten me into obedience." Arion met her gaze. There had been a time when those same stories had been whispered to him as warnings too. A king whose heart woke would be a king who felt too much, they said. A king who might choose mercy over power, a dangerous king. "Fairy tales do not usually come with my handwriting," he said quietly, nodding toward Leora's letter. Liora swallowed. "So it is real," she said, more statement than question. "You wrote this, you gave your blood to save a baby." Her voice shook, but not from hatred, from something more complicated. "Then you forgot about her." The words cut because they were not untrue. Arion had not forgotten. He had buried the memory deep, the way one hides a wound they cannot heal. But from the child's point of view, it did not matter. "I remembered," he said softly. "Every time I signed a law about human safety, every time I refused to feed from fear, but I stayed away because I feared what my blood might have done to you. I told myself leaving you with your family was kinder than turning your life into an experiment." Liora looked down at her bandaged arm, at the faint golden shimmer in the vial. "Kind," she whispered bitterly. "Kindness that never asks how you're doing can feel a lot like abandonment." The honest hurt in her voice twisted something inside him more sharply than any stake could. He took a step closer, then stopped himself. "You are right to be angry," he admitted. "And yet you came to find me. That took courage." He drew a slow breath. "I will not run from what I started this time." Saraphene watched them, unreadable. "So it is true," she murmured. "You broke the oldest rule, you shared your blood with a human child." Her dark eyes flicked to Selim. and now we stand in front of the one thing the old prophecies feared and hoped for, the heart-bearer. Selim hesitated, then inclined his head. Her blood shows signs of regenerative power beyond anything I've seen. And your heart, he looked at Arion with a strange, quiet wonder. It beats, my king, however faint it beats. The room seemed smaller now, the walls closer, the future sharper. If the council learned of this, they would not react with wonder. They would see danger, leverage, or a weapon. What does this prophecy actually say? Liora asked, her voice steadying. Everyone keeps hinting about it like some dark bedtime story. If my blood is going to cause this much trouble, I would like to know why. Saraphene studied her for a long moment, perhaps surprised that the frightened girl from the road spoke like someone who expected answers, not mercy. Very well, she said. You deserve that much truth. She walked to one of the shelves, fingers drifting over the spines of old books until she pulled out a small leather volume. Selim tensed but did not stop her. She opened it to a page marked by a faded ribbon, then read in a low, clear voice. When the heartless crown first beats again, born of shared and broken sins, a child of dusk and mortal day, will hold the choice to fade or stay. Through living veins the night may heal, or break beneath the turning wheel. If fear would rule, then she must fall. If love would lead, let her save all. The words settled over them like a second silence. Leora's fingers curled around the letter until the parchment crinkled. So people will either want to use me, she said slowly, or kill me. Wonderful. It is not certain, Selim said quickly. Prophecies are mirrors, not chains. They show possible paths, not fixed futures. But they do influence behavior, Saraphene added. The radical clans will hunt her as a threat. The fearful will demand her death to avoid change. Others will try to seize her to control you, Arion, and the council, she exhaled once. They will insist she be brought before them at dawn. Arion's eyes hardened. No. The single word carried more weight than a shout. Even Saraphene's back straightened at the tone. Liora looked up, surprise flashing through her fear. You cannot hide her, Saraphene said, softer now. Not from them, not if they already felt your heart move through the stone. They will know something has shifted. I can and I will, Arion replied. At least until we understand what this means for her. She is not a relic to be examined, nor a weapon to be debated. She is a person, a frightened one who has already been treated like an omen her whole life. His gaze met Leora's and something steady formed there, a promise he had failed to keep once and would not fail again. I will not deliver her into a hall of wolves and call it justice. Saraphene's composure flickered for a heartbeat, revealing the girl she must once have been before politics carved her into marble. And if they question your loyalty, she asked quietly, if they say your beating heart has clouded your judgment, they already mistrust your softer laws. This will confirm everything they fear. Then let them fear, Arion said. I would rather stand alone for what is right than rule forever for what is wrong. There it was, the thing she both admired and resented in him, his stubborn belief that compassion could be stronger than terror. Saraphene closed the book with a soft thud. You speak of standing alone, she said, but you are not alone. I am your betrothed. The council is my duty as much as yours. Do not ask me to lie to them. Liora watched the tension between them, something new forming in her understanding. This was not just a cold political match. There was shared history, shared pressure, a long habit of sacrificing pieces of themselves for a throne neither fully loved. She felt a strange sympathy for Saraphene, even as the woman frightened her. You don't have to lie, Liora said quietly, surprising them both. You just don't have to tell them everything yet. She swallowed hard, then forced the words out. If my life is really tied to some choice between fear and love, then I need time to understand who I am before they decide what I'm allowed to be. There was a tremor in her voice, but also a steel that matched Saraphene's own, vulnerability and courage in the same breath. For a second, something like reluctant respect passed through the older vampire's eyes. Selim cleared his throat gently. There is a compromise, he offered. We can move her to the old solar above this ward. It is shielded from most of the castle's listening stones. Only those you trust, your majesty, will know she is there. Saraphene can truthfully tell the council that we are investigating the strange tremor in the king's heart and that no cause has yet been confirmed. Saraphene considered it, jaw tight. They will not like it, she warned, but it may buy us a day, perhaps two. Arion nodded once. It was not enough, but it was something. Then we use those days well, he said. He turned to Liora. Will you trust me with this, to hide you for now, not as a prisoner, but as someone the world is not yet safe for? Liora met his gaze. There was still hurt there, the knowledge that this was the man who had changed her life before she even knew how to speak and then disappeared. But beneath it was the memory of his hands pulling her carriage back from death, the way he had taken the blow instead of letting it strike her, the way his voice shook when he admitted his mistakes. "I don't know if I trust you completely," she said honestly, "but I want to, and I'm tired of running alone." She drew a breath that steadied her shoulders. "So, yes, I'll stay." Something eased in him at that, a quiet, fragile hope. He offered his hand to help her stand. As her fingers slid into his, a warm ripple shot up his arm, straight to his chest. His heart answered with another beat, stronger this time, like a drum finding its rhythm. The effect did not stop there. A faint tremor moved through the floor stones, racing outward from the ward like a wave. In distant halls, torches flickered. In quiet towers, ancient vampires paused mid-step, hands pressed to their chests as they felt, for a single impossible moment, a phantom echo where no pulse had been for centuries. The castle itself seemed to inhale. Liora gasped, nearly losing her balance. "Did you feel that?" she whispered. Selim gripped the table, eyes wide. Seraphine's hand flew to the wall, steadying herself as her calm mask cracked in open shock. The whole stronghold felt it, she breathed. "They will know something has changed, they will come looking." Arion tightened his hold on Liora, not in possession but in silent reassurance. His newly awakened heart pounded in his ears, but his voice, when it came, was calm. "Then we move now," he said, "before the council arrives." Above them, footsteps began to echo in the corridors. Many feet, moving fast, drawn toward the source of the impossible heartbeat that had just rattled stone and bone alike. And in the shelter of the small ward, with a prophecy glowing in a glass vial and a choice standing between them, the vampire king, his wary bride-to-be, and the girl whose blood carried dawn had only a few breaths left to decide whom they could trust when the doors finally burst open. The first fist hit the ward door hard enough to rattle the hinges. Liora flinched, dust fell from the ceiling in a soft cloud. Another blow followed, then the muffled voice of a guard. "Your Majesty, the council demands entry." The castle felt a surge. "We must confirm your safety." Arion's eyes met Selim's, then Saraphene's. Every second they hesitated was a second closer to discovery. "Take her," Arion said to the healer, already moving. "The old solar now." Selim nodded once and grabbed a satchel, sweeping the glowing vial inside. "Miss Liora, can you walk?" he asked gently. Her leg still throbbed, but she pushed herself up, jaw tight. "If the other option is being marched in front of a room full of angry vampires, I think I'll manage." A corner of Seraphine's mouth twitched despite the crisis. "She has spirit," she murmured. Arion strode to the back wall, pressed his hand against a tapestry, and pulled it aside to reveal a narrow stone arch. Beyond it, a tight spiral stairway curled upward into shadows. The air that drifted down was cooler, filled with the faint scent of old wood and lavender. Liora stared. "You people and your secret doors." "Castles built on fear have many escape routes," Arion said. "I am trying to turn them into routes of protection instead." He looked to Saraphene. "You will face the council." She drew in a slow breath, shoulders squaring as if slipping into armor you could not see. "If I do not, they will tear this castle apart looking for answers. I will give them just enough truth to hold them still." Her dark eyes locked with his. "Do not waste the time I buy you." He wanted to thank her, but there was no room for ceremony now. Instead, he nodded once, an acknowledgement between two rulers caught on the edge of a new world. The pounding on the outer door grew louder. "Open by order of the council," a deeper voice boomed. Arion stepped into the archway and held out his hand to Liora. "Come, quickly." She slipped her fingers into his without hesitation. The contact sent another warm ripple through him. His heart, stubborn and proud, shuddered and gave a stronger beat as he guided her into the stairwell. Selim followed close behind, pulling the tapestry shut. Shadows wrapped around them, broken only by the soft glow of a single crystal set into the wall. "What if they break down the door and see the passage?" Liora whispered as they climbed. "They will not," Selim answered, slightly breathless. "Lady Saraphene knows how to distract a room full of ancient egos. It is one of her more terrifying gifts." Far below, the ward door finally crashed open. Voices spilled in, demanding answers. Then Seraphine's calm tone cut through the noise, cool and controlled, already spinning a story. Liora could not hear the words, but she heard the authority. For the first time, she saw that the Vampire King was not the only one holding this fragile piece together. Her leg ached halfway up the stairs and she stumbled. Arion's hand closed around her elbow instantly, steady and sure. "We can slow," he said. "No," she panted. "If your whole castle just felt your heartbeat, then slow sounds like a bad idea." He almost smiled at that, humor in the middle of panic, another kind of courage. "Very well, one more flight." The stair ended at a wooden door banded with dull iron, its surface scarred by age rather than battle. Arion pressed his palm flat against it. Open, he murmured, voice threaded with a hint of old power. The lock clicked, the door creaked inward. The room beyond was larger than Liora expected. A wide round space with a high ceiling and tall, narrow windows shuttered tight against the day. Dust drifted in lazy beams of lamplight. An old wooden table sat beneath a faded painting of a sunrise. Shelves lined the walls, heavy with books gone soft at the edges from years of being read and reread. There were rugs, threadbare but clean, and a cushioned bench beneath one window. It felt less like a royal chamber and more like someone's forgotten favorite room. The old solar, Selim said quietly, stepping in behind them. Your mother S, if I recall correctly, your majesty. Arion's gaze softened as he looked around. She preferred the morning light, he said. Even after she turned, she kept these shutters thin enough to let in a little dawn without burning. She said it reminded her that night was only half the story. Liora turned slowly, taking it in. The air smelled of paper, oil, and something sweet she could not name. She felt her chest ease despite everything. It's beautiful, she said, in a lonely sort of way. Arion closed the door and drew a small knife from his belt. The blade was simple, not jeweled, a tool, not a threat. Liora tensed until she saw him turn the tip toward his own hand. What are you doing? She asked. Warding the room, he replied. Old magic answers to blood. He sliced a shallow line across his palm, no gore, just a dark welling that he didn't even flinch at. He pressed his hand against the wood above the lock. Ancient marks carved there, nearly invisible until touched, flared faintly in response. Heat shimmered under his fingers, and the air in the room thickened like the moment before a storm. This will blur the listening stones, he explained. Conversations here will sound like harmless echoes elsewhere. Sense will be muted, not perfect but safer. Liora watched, oddly moved. You're bleeding for me, she said, the words out before she could stop them. He looked at his palm, then at her, a hint of surprise in his eyes as if he had not considered it a big thing. It is a small price, he answered. I have bled for less worthy causes. Selim was already bustling around, pulling clean blankets from an old chest, checking the shutters, lighting a few more lamps. Sit, child, he said gently, nodding to the bench. Your leg will thank you. She obeyed, sinking into the cushions with a sigh. The ache in her muscles hummed along with the far stranger feeling in her chest, the awareness that every time her pulse jumped, the king's did too. She could not hear his, but she felt it faintly like two harp strings tuned to the same note. Is it always like this for you? She asked now, looking up at him. Feeling so much, the fear, the responsibility, the everything, her hands twisted in her lap. Because if my blood really woke your heart, I don't know if that's a gift or a curse. Arion wiped his palm on a cloth Selim handed him, the cut already closing over. He leaned against the table, facing her, and for a moment he looked less like a king and more like a weary teacher at the end of a long day. When my heart was still, he said quietly, I could choose what to care about. I could look at suffering and treat it like a puzzle. I could promise justice without feeling the ache of those I failed. It made ruling simpler, wrong but simpler. He glanced at his hand, flexing it as if testing an invisible weight. Now, every time you're afraid, something inside my ribs tries to answer. Every time you're brave, it steadies. I feel my people more sharply too. It hurts. He gave a small, almost embarrassed huff, but I think maybe that is how it should have always been. Leora's throat tightened. In my village, she said, we told stories about you. Some said you ate whole caravans, others said you walked the streets at night and left coins on the windowsills of poor families. Her lips curved faintly. As a child, I decided that both could be true, that maybe a monster could be trying very hard not to be one. Arion blinked, caught off guard. That is a generous view to take of a distant king you never met. It made it easier to sleep, she admitted. If the monster wanted to be kind, then maybe I had a chance too. Her voice fell. So if my blood really is mixed with yours, I don't want it to make me into something terrible. I'd rather die as myself than live as a story people use to scare their children. Silence stretched. Selim watched them over the rim of a teacup he had poured for himself, eyes gentle and worried. Arion stepped closer, his expression rawer now, the careful king dropping for a heartbeat to reveal the man who had stood over a dying baby and done the unthinkable. Liora, he said, you are not a mistake. You are not a weapon, whatever the prophecy says, whatever my past choices have tangled into you, your life is still yours. I will fight anyone who tries to claim otherwise, even if that anyone is the council, the clans, or the old laws themselves. Her eyes shone. You say that like you already expect to lose something for it. I expect to lose many somethings, he replied simply. Power, allies, reputation, perhaps even my throne, but if keeping those things means betraying you, then they are not worth keeping. His honesty hit her harder than any pretty promise could. A quiet steadiness unfurled in her chest, still mixed with fear but threaded with trust that hadn't been there before. Below them, faint and muffled through layers of stone, came Saraphene's voice, firm and cool, holding back the tide of questions. Liora swallowed. "She's risking herself for me too, isn't she?" she said softly. Arion nodded. Saraphene was raised to believe in order above all. Defying the council costs her more than it costs me, but she is choosing to do it. He hesitated, then added with surprising humility, "I have asked much of her over the years, more than was fair. Perhaps this is the first time I am asking something for the right reason." Selim set down his cup. "Speaking of Saraphene," he said, "we should assume she cannot hold them forever. The council will demand a formal audience before dawn." His gaze moved from king to girl. "They felt your heart, your majesty, they felt something. They will not rest until they have a story that calms their fears." "And if they don't get one?" Liora asked. Selim's expression turned grave. "Then they will write their own, and those are almost always worse." Arion pushed away from the table, pacing once, twice, his cloak whispering against the floor. "I will meet them," he decided. "Alone, I will tell them the tremor was a result of an old spell I asked you to test, Selim. Something private, foolish perhaps, but harmless." Selim arched a brow. "You are not usually so eager to call yourself foolish in public." "Humility disarms," Arion said. "If they think I am slightly ridiculous, they may stop looking for daggers in the curtains." Liora managed a small smile at that. "I'm starting to like your strategy." His gaze softened again. "Stay here, rest, do not open the door unless you hear my voice, Silem's or Saraphene's, no one else." His tone left no room for debate. She nodded, fingers curling against the bench. She wanted to say something more, something like, "Come back in one piece," or "Don't let them break you for my sake." Instead, she heard herself say, "If they ask you what your heart beats for now, what will you tell them?" He paused in the doorway, the lamplight tracing the line of his jaw, the silver edge of his crown. Slowly, he turned back. "I will tell them," he said, "that it beats for the same thing it always should have, for my people, all of them, those of the night and those of the day." His eyes met hers, warm and steady. "And if they listen closely, they will hear that it beats a little louder now because one stubborn human girl reminded it how." Heat bloomed in her cheeks. Before she could answer, he slipped out, closing the door behind him. The wards flared faintly, then settled like a soft blanket around the room. For a moment, only the ticking of an old clock filled the solar. Selim busied himself at the table, decanting Leora's glowing blood into smaller vials and scribbling quick notes. "Try to sleep, child," he said without looking away from his work. "Tomorrow will be heavy enough." "Sleep," she echoed. The word felt distant. Her mind spun with prophecies and councils and kings who bled on doorways. She pushed herself to her feet and limped to one of the narrow windows. Gently, she lifted a corner of the heavy curtain. The night beyond was clear and full of stars. Down in the courtyards, she could see movement, tiny specks of torchlight swarming as guards hurried to and fro, stirred by the echo of their king's impossible heartbeat. "I used to think the world was small," she murmured, half to herself. "Just my village, the fields, the market road. Now it feels like it could crush me in one hand." Selim looked up, his eyes kind. "The world grew no larger," he said. "Only your place in it did. That is always frightening at first." She let the curtain fall and turned back. "Do you believe the prophecy?" she asked him. "About me, about saving or breaking everything?" He considered his answer carefully. "I believe," he said at last, "that power tends to find hearts already leaning in one direction. Yours leans toward compassion even when you are angry. That alone changes how any prophecy will play out." He gave her a small smile. "And I believe that the king you have woken is not one who will let fear choose for him again." Down below, deep in the stone belly of the castle, a heavy door slammed. Voices rose, more numerous now, moving toward the main council chamber. Liora could not make out the words, but the tone carried, the sharp edges of demand, the dull weight of tradition, the thin thread of Saraphene's restraint. She sank back onto the bench, heart pounding in sympathy with the one she could not see. For the first time, she wished she could shield him from his own people as he had shielded her from his kind on the road. Time stretched, the old clock ticked. Selim wrote, somewhere a bell tolled the deep hour before dawn. Then, faint and distant, a new sound reached them, the deep, solemn chime of the council gong being struck 3 times. Selim's pen stopped mid-word. "They are convening the full assembly," he whispered. "At this hour, that is not a good sign." "What does it mean?" Liora asked, throat dry. "It means," he said slowly, "they intend to use old measures, ones not called upon in generations." In the great council hall below, dozens of cloaked figures were already gathering as Arion entered, his face composed, his newly awakened heart hammering a traitor's rhythm beneath his calm exterior. The highest seat, carved from obsidian and bone, stood empty, a chair he rarely sat in, but one they were determined to see him fill tonight. At the far end of the long table, an elder vampire with a shaved head and eyes like polished stone rose to speak. Counselor Malachar, oldest of the Night Court and keeper of laws that predated half the castle. King Arion, he intoned, the castle has stirred with a force unknown since the founding. We felt a beating where no beat should be. We demand to know its cause. Arion folded his hands behind his back, the picture of measured respect. You feel change and assume danger, he said. I asked my healer to test an ancient spell. It appears it brushed the walls more deeply than intended. I am unharmed. Murmurs rippled, some sounded doubtful, some sounded afraid. Malachar's gaze narrowed. We are not children to be soothed with stories. The tremor carried more than magic, it carried life. He lifted a hand. Two attendants stepped forward carrying a heavy wooden chest bound in black iron. The moment they set it on the table, the air in the room seemed to thicken. Even from the gallery, younger vampires shifted uneasily. Arion's stomach sank. He knew that chest, had hoped never to see it opened again. The heart-glass, Selim whispered in the solar above, going pale. They kept it. Liora turned to him sharply. What is that? An old relic, he said, voice tight. Forged when fear ruled every law, it reveals any blood that can stir dead hearts or bridge mortal and immortal. They will use it to test the king and to search the castle for whatever else it might react to. Below, the chest creaked open. Inside, on a cushion of black velvet, lay a crystal sphere the color of clear water just before sunrise. Faint veins of red and gold pulsed deep within it, slow as sleeping breaths. Malachar's voice rang out. If this was only a spell, it will remain still. If something more dangerous walks our halls, the heartglass will show us. He looked directly at Arion. You will place your hand upon it, my king, for the safety of all. The eyes of the council turned to him, demanding, hungry for certainty. In the solar, Liora felt the wards around the room tighten, reacting to the awakening relic below, like one bell answering another. A faint hum vibrated in the floor beneath her feet. If he touches that thing while I'm here, she whispered, realization crashing over her, it will light up, won't it? Selim swallowed. If the legends are true, it will do more than that. It may call out to your blood. To you, they will know you are in the castle before we can move you an inch. She pushed herself to her feet, panic making her injured leg wobble. So what do we do? I can't just sit here while they use some magic lantern to sniff me out like spilled wine. He opened his mouth, closed it again, at a rare loss for words. Down below, Arion walked slowly toward the heartglass, every step measured. In his chest, his living heart beat hard enough to ache. He knew that if he refused the test, they would brand him a liar. If he accepted it while Liora remained in the castle, every secret he was trying to protect could shatter in an instant. Liora, Selim said suddenly, turning to her with a mixture of fear and resolve, there is one thing we can try, but it will hurt, and it is not without risk. Her breathing hitched. What is it? He reached into his satchel and drew out the small vial that held the first drop of her glowing blood. The liquid shimmered as if sensing the stir below. We can try to veil your presence by binding a fraction of your power to mine, he said. It may confuse the relic long enough for the king to convince them the surge was only in him. His eyes darkened. But if the binding goes wrong, it could weaken you, or worse, draw the heartglass's attention straight to this room. Outside the solar door, the ward marks flickered uneasily, reacting to the rising energy from the hall. Below in the great chamber, Malachar's voice boomed, Your hand, Arion, now. The vampire king stood before the heartglass, staring at his own reflection in its surface. The faint red ring of his eyes, the tired lines that no immortal should have, and somewhere deep within, the shadow of a girl's face whose blood had woken a dead heart. He lifted his hand. In the solar above, Liora looked from the vial to the door, to the floor that thrummed beneath her boots like a caged drum. Her next choice would decide not only her fate but his. And as Arion's fingers descended toward the waiting crystal, Liora drew in a shaking breath and reached out toward Selim's offered vial, knowing that whatever she chose in the next heartbeat could turn the entire castle either toward salvation or toward ruin.